Well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge the Robbins family plus one. I think they're the Rockin' Robins, aren't they? Really wonderful. And that daughter that she was talking about that went to OSHA, she's now all grown up and absolutely wonderful. And she's Elsa, and who else at Disney? She's one of the Disney characters, and she's part of the cast at Disney. And I know her from when she was this big, and I baptized her. So I think one of the wonderful joys of being long in the tooth is just being able to watch all these families grow and see these little babies that I baptized turn into grown-ups, and watch people like Reverend Josh become a minister, watch Donna, because I knew Donna I'm not sure what year we met, but we were at the church 32 years ago, so a long time ago. You were in my classes. She became a practitioner, and while she was becoming a practitioner, we had an opening at the office for a new administrator. She became the administrator. She was the administrator with me when I was there. And now here she is, this minister herself. And not only is she a minister, but she's a hospice chaplain. I don't think there is any more work of honor that a minister can do than being the midwife for people as they move from this existence into the next. So I've loved watching you grow up. We'll just see now what happens from here. You're still a kid, 48. What the heck? You got... So I want to acknowledge you for all that you've accomplished through those years, and so many of you. I mean, I see brides and grooms in the room, and you're still married. That's the part that's so cool.
Yes, you are.
And I am too. That's right. Yeah. So, yeah, absolutely. So there's a custom in Centers for Spiritual Living that has gone on forever and ever and ever, and that is that the very first part of the year, we go back to the basics. And for years, we had this tradition of going through the first 4 chapters of the Science of Mind textbook during the month of January. Well, I'm not going to do that today. We're not going through the first 4 chapters of the Science of Mind textbook. Besides, I think Ernest had other writings that were a lot juicier than the first 4 chapters of the Science of Mind textbook. Although I think it's wonderful, and if you're taking foundations, it's a great start, and if you haven't taken it, do take it. But what I do want to do is talk a little bit about the 3 things that I find are sort of the essentials of Science of Mind. And why do I think that's important? Because I do think it's necessary to go back and all of us remind ourselves again what the essence of this teaching really is, so that we remember it and sort of maybe move into a new level of it. We are also part of a much larger movement called New Thought. One of my friends, Reverend Kathy Ann Lewis up in Seattle, always says, yes, we're part of New Thought, so have one. I love that. But New Thought is really ancient wisdom brought up into a new context. And a great deal of it is based on the teachings of Jesus, but also many other masters, many other mystics. And in Science of Mind, we are this wonderful conglomeration of ancient wisdom, of philosophy, of natural laws, of science, and of spiritual teachings. And most especially, Ernest Holmes, when you read the textbook, focuses on the teachings of Jesus. But he also includes all of the great teachings of the various spiritual paths on the planet. In fact, later in life, he became very interested in Hinduism and started studying with Sri Aurobindo, who was a wonderful mystical Indian teacher. So one of the things that Ernest Holmes said that used to be on almost every wall in every center, there was a portrait of Ernest Holmes with this saying underneath it: there is a power for good in the universe, and you can use it. And it also uses us. A power for good in the universe, and you can use it, and it also uses us. It's reciprocal. The universe is reciprocal. So when it comes down to the basic teachings of our philosophy, faith, and way of life, there are 3 things that I feel kind of sum it all up. And here is what they are. 1, God is all there is. How many times have you heard that? God is all there is. 2, the kingdom of heaven is within. It's right here within us. And 3, it is done unto us as we believe. To me, those are the 3 essential core teachings. Now, they are not all that we teach in Science of Mind, and certainly that's why you learn the core concepts in the foundational class, and you'll learn a lot more. But that sounds very simple, right? Those three things. God is all there is. The kingdom of heaven is within. It is done unto you as you believe. But let's look at them in a little more depth. God is all there is. And we teach a lot about the qualities of God when we are practicing for spiritual mind treatment, which is our form of effective affirmative prayer, a practice that we use. Some of you, if you're new, it's a 5-step process of prayer. And we start out by calling forth from within ourselves the recognition of the qualities of God. Things like love and light and peace and wholeness and wisdom, intelligence, grace, all these wonderful God qualities. And all of these are wonderful qualities that we want to focus on and draw out from ourselves, from within ourselves. And yet, if God is all there is, and we have to look at what God is all there is means, then God is light and darkness as one, joy and sorrow as one. It is growth in the one sense and retraction in the other sense. It is creation, but also destruction. You can't have new growth unless the old falls away, right? And it is life and it is death, birth and death. It is all of that. God is all there is. There is no opposite. It's all one. So all that God is expressing itself through all that is. All of life. It is expressing itself through you and through me. It is expressing itself through creation all around us. And it's also expressing itself through stuff that we don't like. Things that are difficult, things that are hard to see and hard to watch. So when we think about it that way, we recognize that you can't have sunshine 24/7. We need that cycle of rest. And we certainly don't want violence or war, and yet they occur too. But the difference is that is not God making that war. God is not making that violence. That's human activity. That's when we misuse this divine experience we call God. That's the misuse of the laws of God. So God doesn't do that. And also, when we look at God as all there is, encompassing everything, and other great traditions, I'll give you 2 examples. In Islam, there are 99 names for God. And some of those names are absolutely wonderful. And some are destroyer. Some are other words that we would consider to be negative, because in Islam they recognize this allness of God is everything. In Hinduism, which believes in one God but has many different deities to express the different aspects of God, there is Kali, and Tara, and she's the goddess of compassion and love. But then there's also, I forgot his name. What is the other one? Shiva, who is the destroyer. So, but they see that this is all wrapped up in God. And when we begin to see God as this overarching energy of life itself in its allness, it helps us to better understand things like the fires and the storms and the hurricanes and the questioning that so often happens when we see something like what happened last week in Montecito. Where is God in all of this? God is right there in all of it. God is in that boulder and in that mud, and God is in the people who made their transition, and God is in the people who are grieving, and that God is in the survivors, and God is in the first responders and the dogs that are out there searching. God is in all of it. And so it's really up to us to understand and to take into, like you said today, to get that understanding within our own selves about this is life. This is life expressing. Some traditions would say God is punishing those people. That's why he sent those boulders. No, God doesn't do that. That isn't God. That's somebody's interpretation of an angry, vengeful God sitting on a throne making judgment. That is not God. Because God is life expressing in all ways. So that concept of God is all there is a lot bigger than just what we sometimes see it as. It is absolutely in and through and as everything. All the omnis, right? Omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent. So that's one. Secondly, the kingdom of heaven is within. And Jesus tells us this several times in the Gospels. Sometimes he says it's at hand, meaning, it's right here in front of us. Other times he calls it the kingdom of God within, and other times he calls it the kingdom of heaven. But that heaven is that which we create within ourselves. Pope John Paul finally came out a few years ago and declared there is no hell. That was good of him. I'm glad he did that. But hell is something we create inside ourselves, right? We can make our own hell. You know that joke about the difference between a religious person and a spiritual person? A religious person is somebody who's afraid of going to hell. A spiritual person is someone who's been there and doesn't want to go back. That's why we're all in this room, right? So the kingdom of heaven is within us. And that's because part of our consciousness recognizes a part within us that is always and already and has ever been whole. Always. You all know that spot, that place within where you can go where you know you're okay, no matter what you're going through, no matter what difficulties may befall you, you know there's a place, that holy of holies, if you will, within your own being. I call that the kingdom of heaven, that place within where the divine spark is, where that divine spark is, that essence of spirit that is who you are, because we are all expressions of the one, of God. And in being made in the image and likeness of God, we too contain the allness of God. Don't we also have all these various aspects, all the good stuff, and that's what we want to focus on, just like the wonderful song you sang this morning, but we carry all of that inside of us. But the kingdom of heaven is within, and it's up to us to access it and choose it and express it in our lives. Recognize it, reveal it, and bring it out into the light. That's what the kingdom of heaven is about. A spiritual life doesn't mean that everything's perfect. We are perfect. In our own spiritual essence, we are all expressions of the perfection of God. But sometimes on the outside, things aren't always perfect. But it's that we respond to the things that life presents us that make the difference. An awareness that life is for us and not against us. Because again, these are not easy concepts to grasp, but that kingdom of heaven is always present. And so my way of accessing it is exactly what June is talking about, to go back to the breath, to go back to the stillness, to go back to that place inside where I can access that kingdom myself. Once again, our kids are going to demonstrate something at the end of service that you'll just love. I'm not going to tell you what it is because it's just wonderful, but it has to do with that. Now, also sometimes people get the idea that our teaching is all about the movie The Secret. How many of you saw The Secret? Okay, the law of attraction. And you hear a lot about the law of attraction, and Ernest Holmes writes a lot about the law of attraction. And the law of attraction is essentially that law of spirit that speaks to the fact that whatever it is that we are focusing on and bringing out in our belief is what we draw to us. So the last one is this idea of it is done unto you as you believe. Personally, I thought The Secret lacked a lot. I mean, it did teach a lot, but I saw it more as superficial and not really getting down to the depth of what it means to really practice that law and to really practice what it is to understand it is done unto you as you believe. In the Bible, Jesus, you may remember this story, Jesus is approached by a Roman centurion. Now, Israel was occupied by the Romans during the time of Jesus, and the Romans and the Jews didn't get along very well at all. So for the Roman centurion to even come and approach Jesus was very much a big thing. And he said to Jesus, "My manservant is sick. But I would like you if you would just say the word so that he will be healed." And Jesus says, "Do you want me to go to your home?" He says, No. I'm a man of authority, and when I speak my word, it is done. And you are also a man of authority, and I know that when you speak your word, it is done. And Jesus said to him, "Go, your servant is healed. It's done unto you as you believe." And then he turned to his disciples and said, "Nowhere in all of Israel have I seen a man of such faith." So what we believe at the very essence of our experience is how we experience life itself. When we understand that our word, when we are affirming and praying and speaking our word, that our words have power, then we are understanding that power of belief. But oftentimes we have within us some beliefs that are limiting to us too, right? Some of it, again, in the foundational class, that's one of the things that you look at are, what are your limiting beliefs? What are the things that are holding you back? Because how we outpicture our experience of life is based upon how we believe within ourselves. Do we believe that we live in a world that is open and loving and beautiful and affirming? Or are we living in a world that is hostile and scary and frightening? Because however we perceive the world to be is how we will outpicture our experience. Does that make sense? So it is done unto us as we believe. Don and I, years ago, took a trip down to Key West, Florida. We used to go down there. I don't know, we've gone down there a few times. We like Key West. It's a really cool town. And we were taking a tour in this little sort of golf cart wagon thing. It was golf cart. The tour guide was up there with his microphone, and then we were all in these little, kind of like a kiddie train, but for adults, going through the streets of Key West. Well, he took us to a cemetery, and he says, "Here's our town cemetery." And of course, it's probably got graves that are really, really old. We didn't get out to look around. He says, "Yeah," he said, "there's a grave in there. There was this lady that lived here in town. She was such a nuisance. She was always complaining about her health. She always thought she was sick. She was a total hypochondriac." And he said, and her headstone says, "See, I told you I was sick." Yeah, it is done unto you as you believe. So I always love that story. I don't know if it's true or not. I don't care. I think it's funny. Anyway, so Diane Duane, who's a sci-fi writer, says this. She says, "Believe something, and the universe is on its way to being changed. Because you've changed by believing. Once you've changed, other things start to follow. Isn't that the way it works?" So when we believe something, then the universe is on its way to being changed. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to be changing everything in the universe, but it does mean that we change the way we perceive the universe. As we believe, we begin to motivate and put into motion something within ourselves. I always feel like the practice of prayer isn't really about changing something out here. It's about changing us. Prayer changes us. And then when prayer changes us, we perceive things differently. Does that make sense to you? So that's what she's saying. And so prayer works because it doesn't really change always the outer appearance, but there it is. It changes us within, back to that kingdom of heaven again. And I bet you can all think of experiences like that right now, where perhaps the prayer that you were saying, or that you were saying with, or the practitioner was saying for you, caused a shift inside of you that caused you to recognize something in a different way than you had seen it before, which caused you to act differently toward it and have a different approach toward it. Does that make sense, right? So all of us can do that, and as another slogan of new thought, especially us, religious science, is change your thinking, change your life. When we change our mind about something, it changes everything in our experience. Doesn't that make sense too? So one of the other statements of belief in our statement of belief, we have in the Science of Mind magazine, it's in there every month. We read it at a lot of ordinations and installations. One of the lines in it says, "We believe in the healing of the sick and control of conditions through the power of this mind, divine mind, the mind of God, the mind that is within us, the mind of all that is." So I just want to address this a little bit, because again, I think sometimes we take things so literally that there's another meaning, and I think it's important to say that, because I've heard some people say, "Well, it isn't working." Well, I think prayer always works. Prayer always works when we open to it and allow it to change us. But healing of the sick, it says healing, not curing. How I wish that we were that powerful. And it's not that that can't happen, because it does. But healing and cure are different things. So perhaps a cure is just simply not possible for whatever that condition may be and out of reach. But healing means many other things. So maybe that condition goes back into remission. Or perhaps the person has had a long-standing issue with some inner conflict, or perhaps a conflict with something that occurred in their lives a long time ago that left an emotional wound. And perhaps through that healing, that gets healed and transformed. Perhaps that healing comes simply from that idea of a shift in consciousness, a shift in our mind. I've had experiences with many people who have come to me after having gone through some kind of really difficult experience or illness and tell me, this was the best thing that ever happened to me. I can't believe how different I am, and I'm grateful, even though it was really hard. I'm so grateful for what I learned through that experience. So healing comes in a lot of different packages, and I think that's so important that we recognize that. It's what goes on within the person, not what goes on outside. And the same is true of the control of conditions. If we could control all the outer conditions of life, there would be no wildfires, there would be no mudslides, there would be no hurricanes, there would be none of that, no earthquakes, but we'd have an awful big job, wouldn't we? Trying to control all those conditions. But we can control the conditions within our own minds. We can control our inner earthquakes and our inner floods and our inner mudslides, and we can also control the joy and the happiness and the beauty and the gifts of just simply being alive and having another breath to breathe. We can do that, and by our belief, we can respond to the universe, and that controls the conditions within us. You see, the response always has to go back to here, to that place within. To that place within. Alan Watts, wonderful spiritual teacher and philosopher, he says this. He says, you are a function of what the whole universe is doing in the same way that a wave is a function of what the whole ocean is doing. Because we are all part of this allness of life. So we are a function of life, just as the wave is a function of the ocean. And when we're in the flow of life, and when we're in alignment with that, our life moves forward easily and effortlessly and smoothly. So science of mind isn't magic, although it can feel that way. It requires a lot of us. It's a spiritual practice, and only we can do it for ourselves. Certainly we can go meet with a practitioner and have prayer and reflective listening and support when we're going through something difficult, but the work is still within us. And when we become so dependent on someone or something outside of us, then we are abdicating our own personal responsibility for our own path and our own work. Ernest Holmes tells us to treat and move our feet. Treat, that's our 5-step treatment, prayer. He says treat and move your feet. Pray and then take action. And here's somebody, Steve Maraboli, I don't know who he is, but he wrote a book called Life, the Truth, and Being Free. And he says the universe doesn't give you what you ask for with your thoughts, it gives you what you demand with your actions. Treat and move your feet. We can sit all day on our tuffet and, in a perfect mudra or whatever it is we do, but until we pick ourselves up and start moving in the direction of what it is that we wish to experience, it's not going to happen. So we've got to do both. It's both the practice and the action that makes it work. And also one of the other things that we learn in the foundational class is that when we pray, it's fine to pray for something in form, a new car, a new job, a new house, whatever it might be, a new relationship, whatever. But more importantly, I feel, is to pray for the experience. What do you want to experience? Go into the feeling state of it, not just the physical form. So how are you going to feel behind the wheel of that car? You know, what is that going to feel like to you? What is that new home going to feel like? How do you see yourself there? How do you see yourself in that relationship? Whatever it might be. Because I find that when we can tie the experience to our feelings, that is where we use that law of attraction. That's where that comes into play. And that's how it works in the most full sense, because sometimes we might get the thing and find out, oh, like that old song, is that all there is? But when we go for the feeling, we get the feeling. And then we go, oh, this is wonderful. It isn't really what I thought I wanted, but this is it, and it works. So that's what I think is so important. So here's my title. It says the universe said yes, and here's what I mean about that. Our beliefs create our reality. So the universe is always saying yes to whatever it is we believe. And that's where the yes comes in. That universal law of life is a receptacle for all of our thoughts. Some call that the servant of the spirit. Ernest Holmes tells us, and this is your affirmation in the bulletin, the more power one gives to his thought, the more completely that he believes his thought has power, the more power will it have. The more we believe our thoughts have power, the more power they will have. One of the things I do in treatment is always include at the end of it that my words have power and they do not return unto me void. I remind myself of that because I know this is the truth. I'm speaking the truth. So your words and thoughts have power, and you can use them for good. Emma Curtis Hopkins says there is good in the universe, and you should have it. I'd say yes to that, wouldn't you? So when we continually focus on a particular belief, the law of the universe responds with the only answer it knows, which is yes. So we can say, I am happy, the universe says yes. I am creative, the universe says yes. I'm abundant, the universe says yes. Or we could say, I'm tired, and the universe says yes. I'm too old, the universe says yes. See, it's what is going on in our thought process that really does make a difference in the outpicturing of that. So as you begin this new adventure of 2018, still kind of filled with the mystery of what's ahead, we don't even know, take some time to reflect on the yeses you want more of in your life. And as you do that, remember that the universe is always tilted in your favor. So when you combine the clear vision of your heart's desire with movement toward the direction of your dreams, the universe will respond with a great big yes. So let's all say it together. Yes! Thank you.